Today, I'm giving you a complete rundown of my process and how I believe you can do your second army in 40k properly so you don't have to make any more mistakes and you know exactly where your money is going in the first place. But I'm also going to give you my opinion on how maybe starting a second army might not be the best for every single person playing 40k. Now, the reason I'm doing this video is simply because I have just recently finished my entire 40k playstyles factions guide, and that took me absolutely forever to complete. So first of all, if you want to go watch it, you definitely can. But I just want to say that me knowing all these different armies has really given me this like big broad-sided view of how the game really works in terms of everything incorporating with each other, and how you can maybe choose the best kind of army for you to continue even when things might not be like the most optimal for you, and how I can show you the best way to start a second army and not have to waste any time with money or anything that might incorporate your way. So let's just get straight into it with how exactly you can start your second army properly, and if starting a second army is actually for you. But before we jump into how to start a second army properly, I just want to mention some announcements that I actually have to give onto you guys. As you might have told, my camera quality has skyrocketed from what it once was, and that's because I've actually upgraded some of my gear. Now, not all of it is upgraded. The camera is upgraded. I have the Elgato face cam, not the Pro, just the face cam, and I have my own actual microphone now, so I will be able to speak soon. It's just the adapter for it is coming, and it might take some time to get here. So the upgrades are getting in the process, and the video quality is hopefully going to be skyrocketing, and I'm hopefully be able to make better quality videos that you guys can, well, interpret and get information from so much more easier. So basically the process is the camera is here. It's just all I need is the actual tower of itself, the actual tower PC, and the extension adapter lead for the microphone, and then I'm good to go. But yeah, that's some announcements I want to make. Basically, my gear is getting a huge upgrade, and the videos qualities from now on are going to be posted in a much better sense for people to understand a lot more easier. But let's just jump straight into what you actually clicked on this video for: how to start a second army properly. Now, if you are a competitive player, I do not believe you should listen to 95% of what I'm actually about to say, simply because of the reason of having an additional like 5-3-2 armies in your arsenal when you're in a competitive scene, continuously going up against meta shifts and new strategies and people augmentating their own lists continuously. It can be very stressful to simply just play with one army, and the idea of having a multitude of armies to select from, especially when large meta sweeps might absolutely knock one army out of the field post, is fantastic, as it just gives you this open variety to choose from, and you no longer have the stress of needing to make every single list work, because some things can work in different ways because you have multiple different lists. Now, you can still listen to me if you want to. You can still listen to the ideas I'm going to present and some theories I have in terms of what I'm going to be talking about in this video, but I believe that if you're a competitive player, having multitudes of armies, and basically if you're a competitive player and you're playing continuously in a competitive scene, if you're a competitive player and you just play like casually and sometimes competitive, then this advice is going to work for you. But if you're continuously playing high-end tournament-based games, high-end games, and you're actually looking to win money, looking to win continuous amounts of prizes, or you just want to win in general, you want to be a higher up player, then I believe having multitudes of armies is very, very successful for you to become a very, very good player. But that's a very specific genre. I'm simply talking about like high-end tournament players. I'm not talking about competitive players who just like do a competitive match every couple of weeks. I'm simply talking about the people who choose to do tournaments. But yeah, that is, if you are that kind of person, I believe you shouldn't really listen to this, and if you want to, you can click off right now, because the information will just scramble your entire thinking. But if you do want to, that's completely fine, because I do like when people watch my videos. But yeah, let's just jump straight into it with my theories on how to start a second army. So, for some people, starting a second army is fine. Starting two armies, building to 1,000, 1,500, even 2,000 points with an additional army that like contributes different amounts of qualities, whether that be a comparison to Chaos Space Marines to Space Marines, or Leagues of Votann to Genestealer Cult, or freaking Drukhari to Eldari, anything like that. I believe it's perfectly fine for a specific set of players who are comfortable with progressing into a different field. But this is why I believe that for specific people, starting a second army is actually the worst thing you could physically do. I simply want to give you this theory that is proposed. Basically, it's called single tasking, and single tasking is prioritizing one specific task over multitudes of tasks to excel in that one task. Basically, it's making your brain format around the idea of choosing one task instead of needing to spread yourself thin between multiple different tasks. And this is an interesting theory because it applies very well with Warhammer and building two different armies. You see, if you're a beginner to even an intermediate to even a decently good player or even a very good player, sometimes starting a second army is only spreading yourself thin even further to introduce yourself. You see, learning one army set of rules is hard. You see, for a successful army, what I believe is you need to have a good purpose, a good playstyle, a clear mission, and you need a good understanding of the entire codex to basically just wrap your head around them really well. Adding an additional 1, 2, or even 3 armies onto that big pile can contribute to so much just overload to incorporate. So if you're like a beginner player, imagine a beginner player having one army, learning all the rules, and then grabbing another army, having to learn all the other rules, and they never get better in either of them because they're constantly trying to comprise between both of them. They're constantly trying to be competitive between both of them, and ultimately, they don't learn anything. They learn half what they could if they just stuck with one army and succeeded through, because single tasking actually works. If you're trying to get one army done really well, if you want to paint them really well, if you want to learn them really well, then sometimes only having that one army can be beneficial. And yes, having two armies is nice. Having two sets of armies is nice because you say, oh, I get to switch out between both of them, I get to learn new playstyles and blah, 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 blah. But honestly, the idea of having one single army is beneficial in the terms of the single tasking measurable because you're only going into it with a single task to complete. You only need to learn a single task. You only need to learn a single set of playstyle. And once you learn it, suddenly the game becomes a lot easier because you've mastered that skill set. Once you play them over and over again, instead of playing 25, you play 50 games with one army. Imagine that. Imagine instead of playing 25 games with Genestealer Cult and 25 games with Death Guard, you just stuck your head in and did 55 games with Death Guard. Imagine how good you'd be at controlling auras and with Mortarion. Imagine how good you'd be with moving the Plague Burst Marines up. And imagine how good you'd be with the Terminators. Like everything, positioning, putting specific... I'm using Death Guard as an example here, but using the -1 toughness aura continuously, using their detachment rule, spread the sickness, and like putting it in the exact way that makes you win every time, having these design strategies, it wouldn't that be better than just being mediocre with two armies? So I believe if you're a beginner player to even an intermediate to even a really good player, that sometimes if you want to do really good with one army, if you want to do really good with general, sometimes having one army is the actual key to becoming very, very good in selected Warhammer cases. But I want to go over one more set of things before I end off this video. Basically, I want to go into the exact depth of some problems you might be experiencing in terms of starting a second army that aren't just starting a second army, but are actually deeply rooted in your system that I want to solve right now. So let's jump straight into that. Now, I am going to solve every single one of your problems. Well, not all of them, but I'm going to solve all your problems when it comes to this kind of sense of needing to start a second army and some solutions that you can do to hopefully contribute and overcome these urges to start a second army in the first place. Because starting a second army is very expensive, it's also very time consuming, and it just has an additional stress on your general cognitive function to work in two different separate ways, in one playstyle to another. If you have Grey Knights who have a completely individual playstyle and you chuck that onto World Eaters who are like the complete opposite spectrum of them, well, not the opposite, but a decently opposite, then that's a big overload on your brain to have to learn the exact teleporting cognitive abilities and the exact way to rush an enemy round one. So I believe that there are actually some other problems that come in with not just wanting to start a second army, but there are actually some big issues that I'm going to tell you right now. The first one is not liking your army. The first reason people will do it is simply because they're getting bored of their army. They don't like the way they either look, or how they play, or especially the way that the person plays them. So they go, screw it, I'm starting a second army. I'm going into a new field, I'm starting a second army, I'm doing different things, and all of a sudden they've started this whole new army, and it's spread themselves thin. Because people want to do this because they're bored of their army, like I said. And so this is why I believe having army purpose and picking an army that solely plays with your playstyle, no matter how cool they look, having an army that works really well with you when you play with them is fantastic. Now, I believe I picked the best army possible for my playstyle, which is Orcs, but to be fair, I haven't experienced every army, so I don't know. But I would say the feeling of being able to play with an army that works so well with you is a fantastic feeling. And honestly, you start to like any army you play well with. So, before you pick an army, before you even choose an army, before you even think of picking an army, I need you to think of purpose. how do they tie in with what you want to play, and not just how they play in general, because this is going to tie you to an army that's going to be so very good for you. And this is why you need to be cautious what you pick. You can't just rush into Warhammer and pick an army that's just one character look cool, like the High Marshal you see in Black Templars. You go, oh, I want him, and then all of a sudden you got the rest of the Crusader. You don't like the Crusader units. You don't like any of the. You don't like the fact they can't take psychics. You don't like the fact they can't really take rhinos or anything. So you get all upset, and you don't like Black Templars suddenly. So what you need to do is you need to go, okay, what is in my army right now that I like, or how can I make the units I don't like likable? So for example, when I was running Deathkiller Wartrike with the 6 Warbikers, I was actually getting a bit annoyed at that unit because it was so big to carry around, and I was getting kind of annoyed at Orcs, and I wanted to start a new Blood Angels army, and because I was getting annoyed at the way Orcs played. But then I kind of positioned some things a bit differently. I went, okay, what if I split the squad up? Three man with Deathkiller Wartrike and 3 man by themselves. And all of a sudden I had such a more blast because I found that Orcs were so much more mobile. They were so much more out there. I didn't have to be move blocked continuously, and it was so much easier. Well, I didn't get move blocked because they're mounted, but like it was so much easier just to move up the board and position myself easier because I had less or had more units to deal with in different situations. And that's what I wanted from Blood Angels. I wanted fast moving units. I wanted the ability to just get up the board fast and hold points and then just like hold it through there with melee, which is what Blood Angels do. So I incorporated that through my Deathkiller Wartrike 3-man. So sometimes you can make things work really well with just the army you have now. So find out what you really don't like in an army. What is it that you're tying into with the army you want? Because I know there's an army that you want to play right now. There's an army you want to try out right now. So what is that army incorporating that's different to the army you're playing now? And then, once you've got that answer, you can start to incorporate those things. So suddenly, if you say, oh, well, you know, the World Eaters, like, I like the World Eaters, but I really don't like the shooting. Well, that's actually a horrible example because you can't really do anything there. But a better example would be simply like, man, I love Tau, but I really like some of their I really like melee units. I really like getting up the board and having board control. I really like having some decent board control. Well, you can go, okay, how can I incorporate some actual melee threats? Oh, well, the Kroot Berserkers are really good, or the Kroot Rider, or the new unit, the Kroot Berserkers, or the new Kroot Sharper, or the new Kroot Hounds in general. Any ones of those, you can start to incorporate them. And I'm not saying that you cannot start and buy off a new army. I'm not saying you don't need to buy new units in an army. I'm simply saying that you cannot start a second army. You can definitely buy more units in your army. That's what I actually encourage you to do. But starting a second army for a whole other reason, having a whole new playstyle, can be painful. So sometimes incorporating things that's already in your army can be a huge benefit. Now, the second one is simply hobby boredom. Some people honestly don't admit it to themselves, but they prefer the actual hobby side of Warhammer moreover than they actually enjoy the playing side of Warhammer. And they actually paint all their army. They finish, they build them, they pull cool positions, they play in different ways, they play in these cool aspecting, interesting formatting, but they get bored. They've got nothing to do in their free time now. They've got tons of free time, and all their hobbiness is over. So they actually lean towards a new army to start to basically continue off that. And the problem is when you have hobby boredom, you continuously get hobby boredom. You'll finish one army, second. And this problem is with this is it's so very expensive to incorporate in. So I would suggest a better way of doing this is simply to buy a 3D printer and then continuously print off subscription-based actual artworks off the internet, because all you want to do, you don't actually care about playing there, and you don't care what the stats are, what's meta. You just want a cool looking unit you can paint up and down and show your friends or show off on social media or whatever you want to do with it. So if you can just get a 3D printing services, which are a ton, to offer monthly subscription based miniatures you can paint and, well, not build, but paint really well to your own standards, you can do that super well. Or you can find really cheap kit bashing sprues off the internet and make your own. There's so many ways to save your bank account and not spend tons and tons of money. So I would recommend, if you have hobby boredom, simply find a really good 3D printing service or get your own 3D printer and then start to like print off monthly through subscriptions, or buy some sprues offline and just go ask people for their own sprues. Go ask for some broken units that you can maybe kit bash or move together and then paint them simply that. There's plenty of ways to save money than just to invest hundreds and hundreds of dollars into Warhammer every single month simply because you want a new army to actually paint. But yeah, that is going to be my entire basically army solution problems. That's going to be if you can figure out if you're starting a second army is actually good for you, or if it's a complete waste of time that you're just thinking about. But yeah, that was the entire video, and I hope I catch you in the next one. But before we go, I just want to mention that, like I said at the start of the video, my entire full guide of every army has been released. So if you want to go check that out, you definitely can. And I've gone through every single faction's playstyle in depthly. So if you have a cool army that you actually, if you've watched this video and you say, yes, I want to start a second army, then simply go check that video out, find out what suits your playstyle, find out what suits your purpose, and jump into a new army. But yes, like I said, it's going to be on me today, and I hope I catch you in the next one.